Good morning, dear friends. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about promoting sustainable cities and communities and how important is that for road safety. We all know that by 2050, 70% of the human population will be living in cities, 20% more than what we have today in our cities. Very important increase in urbanization is going to happen in particular in Asia and in Africa. We are in front of a great opportunity to shift the way we have been doing things or to get in more trouble. I want to now call my panelists. We are going to have the honor of having Minister Francois Bausch, please, if you can come to stage. Lily Matson, Sonia Diaz de Corcuera, and Professor Dinesh Mohan. Minister Francois Bausch is the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Mobility and Public Works of Luxembourg. Lily Matson is the Chief Safety, Health and Environmental Officer at Transport for London. Sonia Diaz de Corcuera is the Director of Traffic of the Basque Government in Spain. And Professor Dinesh Mohan is an honorary professor at the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. I also would like to ask our expert, Sky Duncan, the director of the Global Design Cities Initiative, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, to come to stage and to give us her remarks. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Claudia, and a great honor to be here today to speak to you a little bit about this role that we're talking about, of thinking about road safety through the lens of promoting sustainable communities and cities. As Claudia mentioned, we have had this trend of urbanization, right? To the point that today we have 50% of our population living in cities, and this projection that we're going to have 2/3 of our population by 2050 living in our cities. And this puts an incredible pressure on one of our most critical networks of public space, which is our streets, a very big part of how we think about road safety. You guys probably know that this is our largest network of public open space, which means it's one of our largest untapped assets in terms of how we can address many of the challenges that we're being faced with today. Yet sadly, our policy and design decisions have resulted in an environment where we've actually forgotten that we as human beings are the ones at the heart of these cities and communities, and instead created environments where people have to risk their lives on a daily basis just to get to work or to get to school, to simply cross the street to go to a store, and where we've ended up with situations where our most vulnerable users are having to battle off with vehicles just as part of their daily lives. We've got to the point that our streets are death traps. They're killing people slowly, with the close to 7 million people dying prematurely every year because of the air that we're breathing, close to 40 million people dying from chronic diseases, a large cause of which is our physical inactivity, because we've created streets and neighborhoods and communities that we don't want to send our kids to go out and walk or bike to school. And of course, the devastating numbers of killing people quickly that everyone here knows all too well at this road safety conference. The fact that this is now the #1 killer of our young people is completely disgraceful. It's time that we invert this outdated hierarchical pyramid where the car has been king for too long, and the pedestrian, the people, sustainable communities, our kids, our elderly, our people with disabilities become the lens through which we make our design decisions on a daily basis. That we can shift from global action, from global agenda to local action through inspiring our leaders, informing our practitioners, and empowering our communities with how to make these changes so that we can leapfrog the challenges and mistakes we've made. That we can ask what's possible of this real estate that we have, almost like putting on a pair of glasses to see how we can see this space serve more people in a better way. That our streets can not only help people move around our cities and our communities, but they can help with the biodiversity, our water management, our air quality, our local economies. And we know that if we think about the efficiency of moving people, our prioritization of sustainable modes are far more efficient than this focus we've been having on the private car, that we can move 2.5 times as many people just by rethinking how we use and design that space. So we're at a point, we must stop prioritizing and subsidizing the individual motorized vehicle, and we have to make sure that our sustainable transportation and mobility options are safe, convenient, comfortable, and affordable. It means, I know it's controversial, but it means we have to make it easier for people not to drive. It doesn't mean being anti-car, it means being pro-choice. That sustainable mobility has to be the basic human right that it is. So it's time for us to take off our blinders in the road safety world and work across scales and disciplines, from citywide policies and regulations of land use, density, and transportation coordination, rethinking our master plans, our road safety plans, creating things like NMT strategies, rethinking the guidance that shapes how we design the space in our cities, lowering speed limits in districts, following the lead of cities like Oslo, who have entire areas that are car-free and are now able to show incredible results, as we've seen in 2019. We have to ensure that our neighborhoods allow people to reach their daily destinations within a close distance. That at the block scale, our street designs respond to the context that they're moving through. And at the detail scale, we get things like pedestrian crossings at grade right in our cities. We don't forget about things like accessibility ramps so that we see these types of situations on a regular basis, but that we also create environments where communities can pause or perhaps play and even stay and spend some time, or learn to ride a bicycle. We have to do this across silos, breaking and bridging between the different disciplines, building capacity in our professionals, not only our typical planners and engineers and designers, but also working with our police force and our journalists to really shift and steer the ship in a different direction. We have to learn from local expertise as we're working in communities and implement projects a bit like this one in Addis Ababa that can sometimes be a trial, but coupling this with evidence and metrics so that we know what works, and then we can not only implement these types of changes permanently, but scale them up into citywide programs. We need to rethink our corridors, reduce our speeds, improve our enforcement, and improve our design. A bit like this example in Fortaleza, where the evidence-based to save lives. And we can rethink our real estate in communities like this one in Fortaleza, with simple updates of how we transform spaces, shortening crossing distances, bringing communities together. Not only are able to achieve road safety results with safer speeds, but also create places that people can do more walking and spend more time. So as we promote sustainable communities and cities and break down our silos of road safety, my beg of you, my ask, is to remind you that we need your advocacy, we need your audacity to challenge the status quo of how we've been doing things, and we need your action starting today, so that we're not only working in our silos and addressing these 2 sustainability goals, but that we're really comprehensively addressing the bigger picture of all of the sustainability development goals that we're here today to work together. So let's put people first, save lives, and enough is enough, as we've heard. It's time to take action. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sky, for that inspirational talk and for challenging us to be audacious and to really make the changes that we need in our streets, in our cities. We are going to have a wonderful conversation today with people that have been doing precisely that in their cities, in their countries. So Lily, you come from London. You are working there in transport, such an iconic city, a financial hub, and also a hub for sustainability. You've been working very much on getting more space for bikers, the buses, congestion charging, which is, I bet, not very popular. What are the regulations? What are those milestones that you had to put in place to be able to see what we are seeing in London?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So thinking about the journey of London, and I guess for me, I feel like we're not there yet as the perfect sustainable city, but hopefully we're making the right journey for the 8.5 million people that live there. I think there's been a few really important milestones. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a massive road building program to reconfigure London around the sort of road-based model. And actually, people rose up and rejected that. So there was a period of time where the city was left with what is basically a Roman road network, very, very old, very small roads, and all of the motorization that was coming in that period. So to actually really tackle that, I think the key milestones were some real political leadership around actually saying, no, we are going to explicitly change towards public transport, walking and cycling. And that was when we were allowed to have a mayor, that gave us the power to do that, and he introduced the congestion charge. And that overnight reduced traffic by 20%. We took all the space that was released and filled it with buses, walking and cycling facilities. So actually, the congestion levels did reduce, but over time, the congestion has been replaced by other movement, but it's movement which is space efficient, as we've heard from Sky, and more healthy and active. There's still so far to go, though, so I think beyond the congestion charge, some things were very important. I would say introducing our bike share scheme, even though it's not massive amounts of journeys, is very symbolic and brought in lots of people who wouldn't see themselves as cyclists. Beyond that, having the transport strategy, which I introduced 2 years ago, which made a really bold target where we want 80%, 8 out of 10 of all of our journeys to be walking, cycling and public transport by 2040, has provided a really clear objective around which all the city administration focuses. So there's not just one thing, and I think we started from a very bad place, and we're on our way to a better place. We've reduced death and injury on our roads by probably 50% over the last 15 years. But there was still at least 130 people who died on our roads last year. So it's still too much.
Thank you very much, Lily. How exciting. And I know that air quality is a big worry in Indian cities. You and I were talking, Professor Dinesh, and you were saying, well, we have a lot of focus on Delhi, but there are many other cities that are suffering from air pollution. Is there an opportunity with this crisis to really get Indian cities to be more sustainable, to have more mass transportation?
I think we have to look at cities as living things which change with time and space. So many of the cities in Africa and Asia, for example, their structure is very different from American cities or European cities. For example, Delhi does not have a central business district. We have about 20 business districts. So when you talk about public transport, planning for public transport becomes more difficult. Secondly, in Delhi, about 40% of the people walk to work, which is more than any city in Europe. So when we start talking about encouraging people to walk or bicycle, it makes no sense in Delhi because they're doing it not because they want the city to be cleaner, but because they're poor. And thirdly, there's a problem of thinking about cities. In India, the pollution exists, India and Pakistan, the same pollution exists from Lahore to Kolkata. So every village is as polluted as Delhi. And it's much more complicated than a city in Europe. And how we will change that is going to be difficult because we keep thinking of the same solutions everywhere. One has to think that solutions are common everywhere if the physics is the same. So physics and laws of nature and laws of physics and chemistry are international. But how they manifest themselves in different places are different. And then when we talk of public transport, we have a very serious problem, especially, I would say, east of Egypt, and more in South America. When we plot trips, origin to destination in Delhi, and we've done about 1,000 randomly on the map, the motorcycle is always faster than public transport. Always. Secondly, it's half the price of public transport, the marginal cost. So how do you get people, especially young people, to spend more money and waste more time using public transport? So unless we start looking at why people do what they do and not preach, I think it's very important for us to be a little more humble and give people the benefit of doubt. They also know something about their lives. Why are they making these choices? So if we just say that we are going to give more public transport, if you give air-conditioned buses in Delhi, you won't increase bus use much, because 40% or 50% of families own a motorcycle in a poor country. And in India, only 7% of families own a car. So this focus on the car as an issue is not going to work. And for example, in my university, the large number of faculty members who join as assistant professors and buy a car after 6, 7 years, when they can afford it, and I talk to them, they have no one in their family, wide family, has ever owned a car in the past. Now, if you tell that person now that, let's be nice, don't buy a car because we're going to have a polluted city, it makes no difference to that person. Because unless I say I have a car, and I'm going to get rid of my car. So if only 7% of the people own cars in a society, that's not going to happen in a hurry. And so I think we have to do a lot of work. And the last thing I would like to say is that when you talk about sustainable cities, if the structure has changed over time, all the research done on cities is based on central business districts and car use and metros. Metros were very successful when you had central business districts because you had radial lines bringing people from the periphery to the center. Our metro is now about 300 kilometers. It's functioning at 15% capacity. So I would like to leave all of, I'm not saying that I know too much or anything. All I'm saying is we have to really focus much more on understanding the new city. Europe has never experienced 40% of the families owning a motorcycle. Vietnam, 90%. Try and run a public transport system in Vietnam. So this is what we have to discuss. It's a serious issue. My life has probably been shortened by 10 years. But it's okay. One should die anyway at some point, but not too young. I think I'd be very happy if there was more stress on understanding what's happening. For example, in Delhi, transport contributes only 25% of the pollutants. So and there are about 7 sources of pollutants, which is not true in many richer cities. So those are some of the important issues.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry I can't give you a straightforward answer on how to make it better. If I could, we would have been better.
Exactly, and it's a reflection, and your point of view is very valid. India is a large country and has a very different
Not only
situation.
India. The plea I'm making is that the modern city all over the world, which is expanding, and the new cities coming up, their structures are going to be very different from European cities.
Yes. Very good. Well, yes, thank you. And bringing this issue about not only the car, but the motorcycle, and we're going to continue the conversation, but you have said, I don't have an answer. If I would have an answer, then things will be different. But I'm pretty sure in your academic work and with your students and your colleagues, you have been thinking on what can be these starting points to relieve Indian cities of the stress of congestion and traffic crashes. I'm going to go back to the other panelists while I leave that question to sit on your mind. Sonia, bienvenida. So the Basque Country has been doing really great. We have been seeing a reduction in speeds, for example, in Bilbao. I visited Bilbao, and it seems like everybody is happy and engaged, but I bet that was a big process, trying to get the speeds down to 30 kilometers per hour. Your numbers are also impressive, so I would like to ask you, how is the Basque Country doing in road safety? And it's been easy, the path to get to 30 kilometers per hour?
Bueno, hemos escuchado en las últimas conversaciones en las que hubo ayer, quiero recordar esto de que debemos desacelerarnos, debemos bajar la velocidad, porque la velocidad es un problema y todos y todas hemos llegado a la conclusión de que nos sobra. Y como personas, vivir más desacelerados, creo que en todos los aspectos de la vida pues contribuye a que vivamos de una forma más ordenada, más pausada, más reflexiva y, en definitiva, más segura, que es de lo que se trata. Reducir la velocidad en las ciudades del País Vasco, de Euskadi, en Bilbao, en San Sebastián y en Vitoria-Gasteiz, no es un proceso nuevo, no es una decisión que se haya tomado en el corto plazo. No es un porque sí hay que hacerlo y lo hacemos y a ver qué es lo que pasa sin medir los resultados, sino que es una transformación que se viene haciendo de atrás a través de un proceso de reflexión compartido. Es decir, no solamente entre los distintos gobiernos, gobierno vasco y gobiernos de las ciudades, los gobiernos del ámbito municipal, sino en conversación compartida con la ciudadanía, que es lo que llamamos gobernanza y una visión estratégica, sí, pero no solo de arriba a abajo, sino compartida, visión compartida. Después de este proceso de reflexión al que se llega aceptando las decisiones, se toman estas decisiones de ir reduciendo la velocidad. Claudia, hacías referencia a la ciudad de Bilbao. Es una ciudad que fue muy industrial en su momento y que aquellos y aquellas que habéis tenido oportunidad de conocerla ha sufrido positivamente una transformación cultural muy interesante que también se ha llevado a lo urbanístico. En los últimos tiempos se ha tomado esa decisión de qué hacer para devolver de alguna manera los espacios públicos a las personas y, desde luego, una de las medidas que se ha adoptado es la de reducir en el centro histórico, en las calles más céntricas de la ciudad, la velocidad a 30 kilómetros hora. En un principio había cierta discusión porque hubo grupos de personas que pensaban que esto iba a generar más congestión. Es decir, si reducimos la velocidad, se van a congestionar, va a haber más retenciones en las entradas a Bilbao. Hablamos de una ciudad que tiene muchísima movilidad, muchísimos movimientos diarios, tiene 340.000 habitantes. La realidad ha demostrado que se puede, y se ha hecho, reducir la velocidad, en este caso en Bilbao, a 30 kilómetros por hora, que no solamente no hay ningún problema de congestión, porque hay otras alternativas que se han tenido que activar, poner en marcha, es decir, entradas a las ciudades de otras maneras, horarios diferentes de entradas a las ciudades, de entradas y de salidas. Y lo que es más importante, la medida permanente de la calidad del aire en la ciudad se mantiene en niveles óptimos a pesar del tráfico y del volumen de tráfico que soporta esta ciudad, y además el número de accidentes se ha reducido en 2019 con respecto a 2018 en un 10%. Y eso es un dato que contribuye, que demuestra que las cosas se pueden hacer, que se pueden tomar decisiones de carácter valiente y que además se pueden obtener resultados que son evaluables, que son medibles. Por lo tanto, merece la pena. Y esto es el caso de Bilbao. Luego ya hablaremos del caso de Vitoria-Gasteiz, que es la ciudad vecina. Ha habido un proceso paralelo importante y es cómo hacer desde el gobierno municipal, desde el gobierno de Bilbao, partícipes a la ciudadanía, es decir, crear cultura de ciudad de esta manera, ¿no? Y se llevó a cabo una campaña de publicidad muy interesante en toda la ciudad, incluso en el transporte público, ¿no? En las traseras del transporte público, con una idea, y es que en Bilbao vivimos ahora 30 veces mejor. Vivimos ahora 30 veces más saludable, hacemos 30 veces más deporte al ir caminando y simplemente somos más felices, 30 veces más felices reduciendo a 30 kilómetros por hora la velocidad, porque estamos, algo más sencillo, muy sencillo, estamos menos estresados.
Calidad de vida en el País Vasco. Y hablando de vida, ¿cuántas vidas han salvado, Sonia?
Bueno, he de decir que Euskadi, País Vasco, es un país que no llega a los 3 millones de habitantes, configurado está como una gran ciudad, una super iría, una super city, una gran ciudad que tiene a su vez 3 capitales: Vitoria-Gasteiz, Bilbao, que es la más grande, y Donostia-San Sebastián. Las 3 capitales con sus especificidades. Una es más costera y más turística, Donostia-San Sebastián. Vitoria-Gasteiz es interior y es European Green Capital en 2012 y tiene unas características, es un paradigma de la sostenibilidad que después, si tenemos ocasión, comentaré. Y Bilbao, que es la ciudad del movimiento de los negocios, también de Guggenheim, ¿no? Y se mezcla cultura. Vale, en Euskadi, la gran ciudad, que mide todos los datos de seguridad vial, si nos retrotraemos, ponemos la vista en el retrovisor, en el año 2000 fallecieron más de 200 personas como consecuencia de un accidente de tráfico en calles urbanas y carreteras. En el año 2000. En el 2010 bajamos esa accidentalidad a 67 personas, que siguen siendo muchas. Una vida es un drama y es mucho. Y el año pasado, 2019, lo cerramos con 51 personas fallecidas, que también sigue siendo mucho, porque no es solamente la persona que fallece, sino todo el entorno. Se está reduciendo la velocidad, se están tomando medidas. Estas medidas contribuyen a respetar esa tendencia descendente en el ámbito de la seguridad vial, en el ámbito de la accidentalidad. Pero tenemos un problema. Vamos observando los datos, se hablaba aquí ayer de la importancia de registrar el dato bien fiable. Tenemos un problema y es que ya las personas fallecidas no son aquellas personas fallecidas como consecuencia de un accidente de tráfico de vehículos de 4 ruedas, sino que son colectivos vulnerables. Y ahí es donde entramos más en el ámbito urbano. Es decir, los peatones en una población que es la nuestra cada vez más envejecida, porque la pirámide poblacional afecta también a la movilidad, y sobre todo los motoristas, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, tenemos mucho trabajo que hacer, efectivamente, y en ello estamos trabajando. A cifras pequeñas tenemos también la oportunidad de desarrollar políticas ad hoc, casi personalizadas para cada colectivo vulnerable. Y ese es el trabajo que estamos haciendo para conseguir de esta gran ciudad que es Euskadi, con sus 3 grandes ciudades, ciudades más habitables, más vivibles, si me permiten el término, pero también inclusivas, en las que todo el mundo tenga calidad de vida de una manera segura y sostenible y saludable, porque eso garantiza, no sé, este señor compañero, cuántos años más vamos a poder vivir, pero desde luego vivir de una manera saludable es apostar por las personas y apostar por unas ciudades que son nuestros hogares. Entonces no las convirtamos en unas ciudades inhabitables. Y hay mucho por hacer.
Gracias, Sonia. Minister Bausch, you have been recently in the news. You are becoming the rock star of sustainable mobility. You are making mass transportation free in Luxembourg, a place where every person has a car, or more than one, probably. And you have also put cycling at the top of the agenda. You have built quite a bit of infrastructure there. Luxembourg is a very hilly city, and regardless, you have put elevators and you are making cycling possible there. Has this journey been an easy journey? How is the process to get to free transportation? And I'm not talking about just 3 or 4 old buses that you have put there free, you have first upgraded sustainable mobility and make it free. So I want for you to share the reason why you are making it free. And second, what is the process, the political process and the investment on it?
Yes, thank you for these questions, and good morning, everybody. When I started in 2013 my job as a Minister of Transport, with the ambition to change the mobility behavior in a country where you have the highest degree of individual motorized cars. We are with Qatar at the same level in the world, so I'm not proud about this because I don't think it was a good idea to go in this direction, but that was the reality. And everybody, with this ambition, everybody told me, my political colleagues, that's political suicide. You will finish really, in 5 years, you will not be re-elected, you will be sure that's suicide, it's political suicide. And then we started to develop this ambition and to make a plan on it. So we developed a complete new strategy. A strategy that is really brought us a paradigm shift in thinking on mobility. And what had been said from the colleague of India, it's on one hand, it's right. Every city in the world is different. Every region in the world is different. But what is common in the world is that after Second World War, all cities in the world had been designed for cars. So we planned streets, for example, to move vehicles and not people. And that was the paradigm shift that we really transformed then, to say we will in the future plan our mobility to move people and not cars, for example. So that means that in the city, we have to redesign the streets. We have to look at what is the public space, to whom belong the public space. What is a livable city? We have to give back the cities to the people. That was the first paradigm shift. And so we planned the whole infrastructures like this. And then we developed this strategy, and we started also to really implement a very big investment plan to develop the public transport, to develop the cycling infrastructure. We have the biggest investments in whole Europe at the moment per habitant per year.
How much is it?
We are, for example, we invest 600 euros per habitant per year only to enlarge and to improve the railway system that we have in our country. So what is important to understand, it makes no sense to only make the public transport free, because the bad public transport, nobody will use it more than before. So it's a question about how is it affordable or not. That's clear. But the most important thing is the quality of the system. And you must understand that you must change the system. It makes no sense to think about, there is no silver bullet. It's not the motorcycle, it's not the car, it's not the tram, not the train, not the bicycle alone that will resolve the problems. It's multimodality, really thinking to combine every modes of transport that we have in the society. So we developed this strategy, and more people in our country looked and understand what we are doing. And I can assure you, the elections were in 2018. I won the elections. I won the elections. So you can even, normally in Europe, everybody told me transport ministers, they have a short-term job, 5 years and you are finished. It's not true. If you have the courage, but you must explain, you must develop a system, you must have a strategy, complete strategy. There is no silver bullet to resolve the problem. And that's true for every region in the world. Even in India, it's true. You said that in India, today, you have only 7% of cars in the city. Yeah, that's right. But look already the mess that you have with 7%. And imagine if you continue like this. You can be sure, no matter, it's true that the Indian cities are completely different than European cities. But continue like this and you'll be sure it's not only a problem for the health of your population, but your cities will collapse at the end. It's impossible to continue this like this. We must change the system. That's the most important thing that we have to understand. And now we will launch the free public transport in March. We are still not there where we want to be. We were, I would say, at halfway. the extension, the bicycle infrastructure. Cycling in Luxembourg had completely disappeared as a daily use mode of transport in our society. We had good sportsmen in cycling, but nobody used cycling, bicycles anymore to go to work or for the daily business, for example. So when we started, we had the percentage, not even 1% of the population cycled for their daily use. Now we are already at 6-7%. And with every infrastructure that you put in place, quality infrastructure separated from normal traffic, you can be sure that population will use it. The population will change the behavior if the quality of the system that you put in place instead of what we have today is good. That's the most important thing to understand.
Thank you very much, Minister Bausch. And what I'm hearing from our panelists is leadership, strategy, really looking at what are the results that you want to achieve. You cannot be clocked with traffic, and it's really bad for the quality of life, and we don't want to just live like that, right? So going back to the question and the time that you had to think a little bit and tell us briefly, because I would like to go back to the audience, what do you think are these building blocks that Indian cities can start putting in place?
I don't want to talk about India, because sometimes we think we are from Mars.
No.
You know, we are just like everyone else. We are talking about science. It's not India. It's not India is different. Some cities are different. London is different from Houston. Is Houston India? So the problem is that sometimes I think we must be very stupid. Because I've been in this business for 40 years and come to Europe 3 or 4 times a year, and the US 2 or 3 times a year. And for 40 years I've been told what to do. And if we can't do it, we must be really stupid. I mean, that's a serious issue.
Then let's speak about the science.
So the point is that we started looking at this. For example, in my university, every faculty member gets free housing on the campus. And there's a very nice bicycle path, very nice pedestrian path, shaded. Everyone is within 500 meters or 700 meters of their office. But everyone drives to work.
Why?
Everyone drives to work. So the issue is why? So we are constantly talking about supply. We don't look at other things. So I have come to believe in 40 years, looking at all European cities, that no one uses, not no one, but majority of the people don't use public transport by choice. They use it because they're compelled to use it. No. So if I don't give my faculty,
It is
if I don't
it's a good conversation. So Lily, I see that you are reacting there.
So in my campus, when we stopped parking near one department, they started walking. So the issue is, the reason people walk in Manhattan is because there's no parking where they're going. Outside Manhattan, they're driving. Same thing in London. So you have to have systems where you make it difficult to park for car owners. You should not have parking where they're going, number one. And we have to understand human nature. People are the same all over the world. And with for example, we made an urban policy, national urban policy 20 years ago, which has everything everyone is saying here. It was done 20 years ago. We've done, wherever we can, we've done some good things. For example, we've gone to Euro 6 from Euro 4 in 3 years, which will clean up our cities because it's centralized. Decision-making for decentralized issues is more difficult than centralized. So if our cities have more people using public transport, walking and cycling than any European city, I can guarantee that today.
That's great.
Then if they're still polluted, then we have to find some other ways of doing it. Because I can't just think that in 40 years, if our governments and us find it difficult, and their designs which are a problem. For example, Eric Dumbo from University of Florida says that every department store, so Walmart coming up in the US, increases deaths by so many %. So if you keep exporting block stores, Walmart, deliveries, etc., it's going to cause more pollution and more deaths.
But
you're not willing to accept those things.
I would like to go back to public transportation, and we heard something that I saw all of you jumping off of your chair. So, Lily, do you use mass transportation in London?
Yeah.
And why?
So I use mass transportation now, but I have a car as well. Because for me it's the most convenient. And you're absolutely right. It's impossible. Most people would never think of driving into the centre of London because it would be impossible to park your car. So parking is absolutely the first and foremost thing you've got to get right. You've got to make it really difficult. The pricing that we put on top was only in addition to that. But I think where maybe I don't want us to put European cities versus others. Where we have lessons that we've learned and mistakes we've made, it's about land use. And we know that public transport doesn't work if you haven't got the right shape of land use and density. So we're trying to remodel and shape. We have an enormous amount of outer London, which is extremely low density. It's low density suburbs. The people there are often on low incomes, but they're having to pay a large proportion of their incomes to drive because it's impossible to provide the public transport there. So public transport, where it exists, where it's very good, and we subsidize it and we make it available, people will use it by choice because it's easy and it's inexpensive. But that's not exactly, it's not in isolation from the fact that we've made car use quite difficult. And for us, the real problem is then, how do you unleash the potential of the other parts of the city by infilling densities and development, by taming the car, by beginning to bring those sort of demand management measures to areas where the car is king. That's really politically difficult. But if we don't do that, all you'll have is a city where the very centre, and it's a tiny centre, is perfect and nice and sustainable, and everything around it is unsustainable. So the challenge for us is for the whole of the 8.5 million populace, and the whole of an area which is very, very big. And it's that low density sprawl that for us is the real challenge.
Thank you. And this is a road safety conference, one that is asking us to break the silos. We have broken them very well in this panel. But I would like to go back to road safety, right? And from Sonia, we have heard that the number of fatalities have decreased from 200 to 60, that people love 30 times more closer to home and 30 times more time with my family. But I would like to hear from you, Minister Bausch, how all the work that you are doing relates to road safety. Is it going to save any lives? The same goes to you, Lily. You have gone through a lot of changes in London. But are we seeing any results, any positive results on road safety, Mr. Bausch?
The first thing that you must, for my opinion, understand is that if you want to talk about road safety, you must first see that everybody has the right to be in the road. That's not the case at the moment in the world. The roads had been designed, like I said before, for cars. So pedestrians. We are discussing, for example, now about micro-mobility, these scooters. And everybody says, yeah, where will we put these scooters? We have a lot of accidents now with scooters. But the problem is that our public space at the moment is not designed for this micro-mobility. And it's the same for pedestrians. Many cities in the world where you have a lot of fatalities for pedestrians, with pedestrians. Even in my country, we have too much pedestrian fatalities. It's because the streets and the cities are not designed for pedestrians. The same is for cyclists. So, like I said, you must rethink completely the system and see that everybody has the right to be in the open space, in the public space, and not only the cars. When you look at how many square feet we use in our cities that are completely reserved only for cars, and we must know that a car normal everywhere in the world, cars normally run 1 hour per day, and 23 hours they are parking around somewhere. So it's not very efficient, by the way. But you must understand that you have to redesign your streets. And then the second point is redesigning is one thing, but then taking care that the new rules being respected by the cars. There is a mentality change that must be provoked. For example, in my country, we introduced 4 or 5 years ago speed controls by flashes, by radars, by cameras. Yeah. At the beginning, everybody shouted about this. They said, "Yeah, we don't need this. We are very civilized. We are running without problems without these speed cameras." And then we saw that with the speed cameras, we improved very much at the end the statistics also. For example, when I started I reduced by 50% the death fatality in the roads only by improving the laws and really controlling with the speed enforcement and so on. So it's on one hand the design, and then for a transition period, I hope that humanity will one day be conscious that you have to respect one another in the street, but we are not there. So redesigning the street and then reinforcing the laws, and we also reinforcing the supervision of the laws. It's important. So, and then you will have success. But that's a long way to go. So we come from a culture that had been built up, and the choice. When we speak about the choice today, saying, yeah, the people they do the choice by using the car. It's not their own choice. The society had been built up, had been created at this. Look at what we invested. We invested billions of dollars during the last century, only really to develop this car mentality. And that's very deep in our minds. And changing this, it's really the biggest challenge in the 21st century, but we must change this for several reasons.
Very good. Lily.
So just briefly, because I think we've made the point about the streets needing to be safe. Where I think that we are now making some unique progress in London is looking at the vehicles that we do want to be in the cities. And we know that they will mix with vulnerable road users. So buses are part of our solution, but they're also part of our problem because they kill pedestrians. And logistics vehicles, which we need there. So we've taken a really detailed evidence-based approach to look at the design of these vehicles and are now have whole new requirements to improve the safety of buses. So much safer design, both within the vehicle and outside that vehicle. That technology is used and transferable to any part of the world. So think about the safety of the vehicles that you want. Similarly, with the heavy goods vehicles, we pioneered the work around direct vision in terms of these heavy vehicles so that they're not safe yet, but they're much able to maneuver with pedestrians and cyclists without the same problems. That's now adopted at a European standard level. So any manufacturer looking forward knows that they will have to look to producing to that safety. That will, in time, bring wider safety benefits. So I think you need the whole system, and then you really focus in on what your particular problems are and see what you can do to change it.
And I love that topic, Lily, because now we have a big wave of electric mobility coming in. And there are cities that are really planning to retrofit their fleets. I heard Bogota, for example, is about to buy 350 buses, and it will be a missed opportunity not to take these recommendations. Yeah. So now we have only 5 minutes, and it's been a very rich conversation, but I would like to turn to the public, and we have time for probably 2 or 3 questions, if anyone would like to ask a question. I have one hand there, if the microphone is coming. Do we have anybody here on this side? A second one here. All right, please.
Hi, my name is Jose Guzman from Ciudad Emergente, Chile. My question is for the representative of Luxembourg and Mrs. Duncan, and it's about redesigning. You talk about design and the importance of design, but what are the main roadblocks you see when you try to redesign a street for people and not for cars? That will be the question.
Please, Minister Bausch.
I see it for all the roadblocks, because it's a question now to redesign the whole public space inside the city. For example, just what we discussed before, we must ask ourselves, is it necessary that inside our cities we are running cars that normally had been built to run on the moon, like these SUVs? So is it necessary to, for example, to give these cars XXL parking lots? Would it not be better to reduce the parking lots in general and install, for example, bike lanes in the city? That's one point. The second point is, if you introduce new public transport, I give you an example. In Luxembourg City, we introduced a new tram that is now running with a very high success. And this new tram is not only that you install a new tram. First of all, you take away space from the cars. And second, you completely re-urbanize the area where the tram is running. So you improve, for the better quality of life, the public spaces around the tram. So you use, in fact, the transformation by implementing a new mode of transport inside the city to redesign completely the city center. That's what we did in Luxembourg. So you have to build on both sides.
Yeah, thanks
you,
for the
Sky.
question. I think there's a few kind of key roadblocks that we see again and again. I think one is the fact that a lot of our policies and regulations and guidelines are very outdated. They were often written essentially for highway-like conditions with the goals of moving many cars at high speeds. And we've seen those codes and regulations and policies applied in cities. So I think that's both in terms of transportation and street design, but also in terms of land use and density. So single family homes, for example, the land use around that is this incredibly destructive pattern that is really not addressing the real costs of driving and infrastructure to get out to these areas, right? So I think one thing is each city, while we're very different, and I totally agree with the professor on this, every part of the world, it has a totally unique culture and context, but the fundamental challenges are still the same, and a car and our vehicles are roughly the same size, and we as human beings, we may sound a little different, but we're roughly the same size, move at the same speeds, and are vulnerable to the same level of physics, right? So it does mean that we have to look at our own policies, codes, and regulations, identify where the impediments are, remove those impediments, because often we can't even actually implement what is seen as global best practice, and then update the guidance. But I also think capacity building is a really big part of it. So we have a lot of people making these daily decisions who have been trained with the goal of moving cars through cities, and that's not just engineers and planners. I would say, you know, we see a lot of difficulty even working with enforcement. For example, where you are able to go and show people what's possible and show a different possibility for that real estate of the street. But, you know, police may be saying, no, like we can't do this, our goal is to move cars through. And so I think there's an entire re-education that we have to do, not only of our current practitioners, with incredible leaders like Minister Bausch, but also with our kind of next generation and infiltrate the kind of academic syllabus that we are using to kind of train yourself, like you've got a hoodie on, right? So one of the young people. So it makes me hopeful, but we've got roadblocks, but I think we can address them.
Thank you, Sky. And one last question, another yellow hoodie.
My question is to Mr. Bausch. So it's on the lines of how Luxembourg is making public transport free. I just wanted to know what the driving factors are to suddenly make it free, because there are many reasons. Some is congestion, one is the housing problem in Luxembourg, and there are many possible reasons. I don't want to tell the reasons, but I want to know what is really driving.
Our session is officially over, but we can have 3 more minutes if the audience could join us, please.
Okay, first of all, for me, the public transport is a public service, and that's a big difference, how you see public transport. Do you see it as a part of the economy that had been profitable, as, for example, in the different entities that are running the public transport, or do you see it as a public service? I see it as a public service, and I see the benefits of the public transport on a macroeconomic basis. It's important, today mobility is like having access to water, like having access to housing, is a first need of humanity. And with people that are not mobile in the society, they are really lost. They cannot go to their job and so on, so they cannot participate in the society. So it's a question about how do you organize the public transport in an affordable way with good quality so that everybody can be mobile in our society? And the second point was that in Luxembourg, we had already very interesting ticket prices. We had the lowest fares in whole Europe already today. The tickets income in our public transport represents about 10% of the costs. So it was the last step to do it. But we did it only at the moment when we had this complete strategy also to change the system itself, to go to a multimodal system. And I want to also to say that in this multimodal system, you also have cars. I'm not against cars, but the car, I want to use it in an efficient way, not to go 500 meters. You don't use 500 horses to go 500 meters as a human. Normally, it's good to go, I don't know, to go to the desert and run around in the desert, but not in a city for 500 meters. So it's not efficient. There you have much more efficient ways to run around in the city. So the most important thing before introducing or before announcing the last step to go to the free public transport is that everybody could see that we have a complete strategy that goes in the direction to develop a new multimodal system going from the pedestrians to the car over trains, trams, buses, everything that exists of modes of transport in our society. And then the free public transport can be an important pillar, an important tool really to improve the use of the system itself.
Thank you, Minister Bausch. And with that, we are at the end of the session. It's been a wonderful session. I want to thank you. But also just to summarize a little bit what happened today. We are talking about sustainable cities and how sustainable cities can really make a very big difference for road safety. The places where we live, most of us, probably the majority of us, live in cities. And when we open the door to get out, to go to work or to go to the university or to run any errand around the city, we are in the city and we are facing risk of being hit by a car. We face issues with the mobility that will take us to different places. So it really matters what is the leadership that we have. What are the decisions that we make in terms of what we want in the city? Do we really want to prioritize the vehicle, a car or a motorcycle, or is that in a different way? You have shown us that, maybe it's making mass transportation the same as it is to access water or to access very basic services. We need to start thinking about speed, which is something that is really at the core of making sustainable cities. If we don't have speeds that protect our lives, forget about having people walking and biking freely, right? Like it's not a pressure for them. It's not because of poverty, but because we really believe that this is one right for us to do it. We have also heard very strongly that one size doesn't fit all, and that there are different places in different parts of the world where we have to think about our context, but the most important part is what we want out of that, right? If we want a city where our people, where we are not at risk of dying or getting seriously injured, and we can enjoy our lives in that place, that is a sustainable city, that is a sustainable community and a safe community. Please join me to thank my panelists today, and thank you very much for joining us.